The next presentation in the Lead Marketing Conference deals with the shopper's value equation. Our speaker is Paul Weitzel, VP of Analytics at Inmar. Paul, the podium is yours.
Thank you, John. It's a pleasure to be here, although I have to say I was over three on your trivia questions, and I've been around a while, so that's not saying much. If you look at the past 5 years, I think most people would feel that we've had some pretty strong headwinds and some challenging times. If you look at the past year alone, 90 of the top 100 brands have lost market share across the grocery channel, and 18 major chains since 2014 have filed Chapter 11. So we've definitely have been in some challenging times, as I mentioned, but we are seeing a lot of growth opportunities. It's just that those growth opportunities look different today. So I'll talk about some of those and how we're leveraging as an industry shopper data to make better assortment and new item innovation decisions to capture that growth. So that will be the focus of my presentation. There are 4 areas that I'll cover today. I'll start by providing a level set on the continued channel shifting. So where's the growth going across different channels, and where's the puck heading? I'll then get into the shopper's value equation. That's something that we've developed going back 30 years. It's really how do we evaluate where consumers shop and what's important to them when they select a store. And then I'll finish with looking at the value of the data beyond marketing and a little bit on what we're learning from consumer decision trees. I know most of you, if you're a CPG, you probably leverage consumer decision trees, or you've seen it with some of the retail partners that you worked with. I'll tell you, a lot of the ones that we see are old, or sometimes they're inaccurate. You might get them from a particular retailer that you're doing some work with. And again, I'll show you some results that we've done recently where we're seeing a lot of different, I would say, attribute importance level changes depending on the type of store or even the location of the country. So we'll cover a little bit of that, and then hopefully we've got some time for Q&As. So let's talk about growth. That's top of mind with everyone today. Over the past, I'd say going back to even the early 80s, we've tracked all the different grocery formats that sell food and beverage, and there's about 13 today, and you'll see those here in a second that we do track. We produce something every year called the Future of Food Retailing, and it is an annual report. There's no cost to it. It's a great report on where the channel's going, and it looks at market share and sales, and it covers sort of what are the key drivers across different channels. So I can't get into all the details today, but if you like a copy of it, like I said, there's no cost. So just I think at the end of my presentation there will be an email with my contact. Just drop me a note, and I'll be happy to send you a PDF of our latest report.
We had a question come in, Paul, real quick regarding the growth. How big will online grocery shopping realistically get in 5 years?
Yeah, well, I'll talk about some of the numbers. I mean, today it's about 4% if you include the pure play guys, the Amazons and Fresh Directs of the world. So it's about $35 billion today. We think it will double over the next 5 years. So we think it'll get. We're continuing to see a trend. Most of the growth rates that you'll see here in a second are as a result of new brick and click coming online. But we do have some. We get data from Peapod and Safeway and some others, and we are seeing. We are seeing e-commerce, brick and click e-commerce in some stores running as much as 10% of brick and mortar sales. So we are hitting those magic numbers. It's still relatively small for a lot of stores because they're just starting out, but for some of the mature stores in the right markets, so again, we are seeing some pretty big rates. So 35 billion, probably going to 70 billion over the next 5 years. And if you look at the trends here, going back to the late 80s, traditional grocery stores, supermarkets, mom and pops, they really dominated the food business. But if you see the trend line, and there's a couple data points in 2006, 2009, but if you go and you look at where we are today, the traditional supermarkets only have a 45 share. So a lot of the growth is coming from non-traditional grocery, so club, drug, mass, dollar, and even some e-commerce is in that. And so it is shifting quite a bit. We're about a $1.2 trillion industry. But again, some of the growth is coming in certain formats, which you see here on this slide. The biggest growth we are seeing in e-commerce, but again, that's off of a small base. We have to be a little bit careful with that, but we'll see that continue to trend forward. This is sort of a year-over-year growth number. In terms of traditional grocery, limited assortment stores, and the fresh stores, which would be Whole Foods and Fresh Markets and Sprouts, and those folks are in the 6% growth numbers. So there are some growth pockets there in traditional grocery. We are seeing a lot of interest, I would say, in small formats, where a lot of manufacturers are trying to look at either case pack sizes or even package sizes, and trying to figure out what's going to work in a limited assortment store, a dollar store, a drug store. There's a lot of formats out there, and a lot of interest there. And if you look at this trend line going forward over the next 5 years, again, e-commerce is still going to be where a lot of the growth is, and some CPGs will tell you it's most of all of their growth. So again, while it's a small percent, it does mean a lot to certain manufacturers. And I'll go through some e-commerce numbers. I've got one slide coming up here which will talk about sort of the value of the channel in the departments and how those departments are doing online versus in store. But again, similar numbers here that we saw in a previous slide. There's not a lot of changes. Drug is down a little bit, primarily because of Rite Aid pullback, and Walgreens is kind of flat in some of their growth. Mass is declining, and that's just the conversion from the old traditional Walmart mass to a supercenter format. And the military is the commissaries, and a lot of those folks, you've got trip deployments that shift, but a lot of the military folks are starting to use their dollars and shop in public places. Our inflation is still pretty low. We're at 1%. I think the latest numbers I saw was around 1.4%. So we're still running low. We've got some tariff issues going on, which is killing some of the ag companies. Dairy farmers are going out of business left and right, and there's just some real challenging times when it comes to some of the commodities and the ag prices. But hopefully we'll get through that. So those are the formats. The other thing that we're seeing is a continued separation of the fading of the separation of eating at home versus eating away from home. And if you look at the continuum from a supermarket to a restaurant, the supermarkets are just now getting involved in a lot more, I would say, food service related products. So if it's prepared foods that you can take home, you can pre-order and pick up. Meal kits are really growing. I'll talk about that here in a second. Even some of the retailers, as you guys know, are dabbling in the restaurant part of it. We call them grocerants. So it's a grocery stores, it's restaurants on the inside. We're just going to see a lot more blurring of eating away from home, than we've had in the past. And I think you'll see in e-commerce, you're going to see the guys that are succeed are the ones that are going to be able to blend sort of all of these offerings, sort of the food service with the retail package, and be able to provide you sort of the food you want anytime you want. So there's growth to be had. Again, it's just going to look different than the way it has in the past. So let's take a look at the shopper's value equation. This is something that we track and we monitor. We've done it for 3 decades now. It really allows us to understand how consumers are selecting stores. What are the variables? What are the attributes that are most important to them? And if you look at it, again, going back to 88, so 30 years ago, these are the things that were most important to them. Now, the shopper's value equation, the formula is really price times quality times variety times store times location. So these are the attributes. And these attributes will change depending on the trip or the customer. But this is what is most important to them. So again, going back 30 years when they looked at price, it was really around everyday low price or high-low, and depending on if you wanted the excitement of discounts or if you just wanted to make sure that your store that you shopped at had probably the lowest prices, or at least you were comfortable that on a blended basket they would be low. Today it's really more about personalized, and we're doing more projects ourselves with retailers that are getting into personalized pricing and what we call PKVI. So in every household there's personal known value items that are important to them. And if you can ensure that household that you're giving them the best prices on the items that are most important to them, not all items, but the ones that are most important to them, then you take away that risk of having them shop multiple channels and go different places. So the attribute about prices has evolved in terms of what it means to shoppers, as well as quality. Again, 30 years ago, it was the national brands that were, having the right national brands, and for that matter, there was a move to have higher quality product at all price levels, including private label. Well, today, consumers are looking for authentic brands, better for you items, more transparency on labels and sourcing, and things around clean labels, as you folks know. So it's very different, and that's being driven by the different demographic groups that are coming on. In terms of variety, it was all about one-stop shopping. Big stores carrying every item. Today it's about the right items. And then in terms of the store, it was all about a clean store, clean aisles, less clutter, just an easy environment, clean environment to shop. And today it's about experience. Consumers are looking for that right experience. In fact, I'll talk about it a couple times in my presentation. So sometimes the experience today is more important than the brands themselves, and that's kind of interesting. So when you talk to consumers and about how they're connected to retailers or to stores, the convenience of how they're shopping, getting the product anytime, anywhere, is really more important than anything. And that's one of the attributes that's really impacting where consumers are shopping today. And that plays out a little bit in the last one, which is about location. Again, 30 years ago, it was about convenience. I wanted the store closest to me, and I didn't want to cross the traffic and cross a major road. So often I'd pick a store that was closest because it was pretty much like everyone else. Well, today they're looking for the ability to order by store, or they order in a kiosk, a computer, a tablet, a phone, whatever the case may be. So there's a lot of change going on. There's fundamental shifts led by the millennials, who care more about experience than the brands. There's the rise of online retailing, as we all know. Pick up any magazine and you'll find at least 2 articles or 3 articles in it talking about online retail. There's a greater interest in transparency, and quite frankly, there's a lot of distrust about large corporations, and that's just what we're dealing with. But the experience plays out in retailing formats as well as online. So I know a lot of you have probably heard about Amazon Go. It's been talked a lot about. If you haven't seen it, I just wanted to share some pictures with you because, again, this is all about experience. I live in Chicago, so this is the Franklin Avenue store, downtown Chicago. This is the entrance. You'll see two shoppers coming in. It's funny when you watch it, you see most of the shoppers are in their 25 to 45-year-old range. So it's sort of a younger group. They both have phones. You have to have a phone to get in and an Amazon account. So you have kind of like a QR code. You scan to walk in the store. Like I said, this is Chicago. There's 2 here now. There's 1 in San Francisco, and I think there's 3 in Seattle. So there's 6 stores, but there's been comments about them opening up, thousands of stores, and I think they will. So that's the entrance. On the left is the exit. So that's just where you see the green gates. You basically scan your phone to get in, select any item you want, put it in your purse, put it in your bag, hold it on, just to keep it in your hand, and you just walk right out the gates there, and within 30 seconds you get a receipt. So there is no checkout, and it's a pretty cool experience. Here's the right side of the store. So what you're looking at is about half of the store. So it's small. It's all, it's kind of grab and go and snacking. So if you look at this side, just double it, and that's about the store size. So it's a pretty small footprint. They're still trying to figure out the assortment right here. It looks like there's a bunch of premium candies. I don't think that business has been doing that well. And I know a lot of their categories are still trying to figure out. They don't have a lot of sales history, so it's kind of an interesting dynamic. So they're just trying to figure out what's going to work. It's made up about 50% brands and 50% private label. Here's some beverages. Here are some salads, some fresh fruit cut up. Looks like I think those are breakfast sandwiches at the bottom. Here's a lot of prepared sandwiches and prepared food. Again, a lot of people are coming in, grabbing 2 items, 3 items, and walking out. And the shopping is done all within about 2 minutes. And then the last slide I had are the meal kits. So these are right at the end of the trip. And so if you're working downtown and you want to come in and grab sandwich and snack and beverage for lunch or whatever, and then you can grab one of these meal kits to walk out the door. So these are popping up all over the place. Peapod's got them now online as well, and so we're starting to see it both at a brick and mortar side as well as the brick and click side.
Your question came in, Paul. Yeah, Paul, a question came in regarding Amazon Go. What can we expect from Amazon Go in the future, and is it more of a competitive threat to small urban supermarkets, convenience stores, or is it just a new channel in and of itself?
Yeah, great question. I think initially it's going to be it's going to compete with more urban locations and convenience, quick trip, grab and go. It's going to satisfy a lot of kind of like QSR and food service related trips, but I know they've got plans to do something bigger, and I wouldn't be surprised if they figure it out for Whole Foods or another larger format once they and the technology is pretty good. I mean, I've shopped it a couple times, and I've picked up items, put items down, put them over in a different location, picked them back up, walked out, and they scanned correctly. They have pods in the ceiling that track the items. So the technology is good in a small footprint. So again, initially I think it'll be urban and convenience and grab and go, but I wouldn't be surprised if this becomes a new retail format that eliminates checkout altogether. And if they can get that to work, that would be pretty impressive and a game-changing experience that people are going to want. So as we redefine success, I think experience, again, as I mentioned, is going to be more important in many cases than the brands themselves. That's what people are looking for. Shopper engagement will be multi-channel, fully integrated. We'll have seamless online and offline experience. Again, I know you guys know a lot of this. Consumers just really want to feel connected. And like I said, they're going to places where it's easier to shop and they've got a better experience. Personalization will really move more to a one-to-one messaging and pricing, and I know you guys know that with some of the digital marketing that you're doing, but again, we're going to see a lot more on the pricing side coming up. Another point I think is important, I think we'll see more promotions become what we'd call investment-grade opportunities. So instead of just budgeting 20% of sales against trade, they're going to be budgets are going to be really designed to drive incremental growth, and we're just seeing a lot less return for the promotion spend right now, and so I think that'll change. Real-time transaction level data from the retailers will move to more predictive analytics. We've heard a lot about AI and machine learning. So the good news is we're going to have a lot more actionable insights. I think the bad news for CPGs, though, is, and we're already starting to hear this, I think the ability to influence retailers is going to be challenged. The share of voice could be lost. I've had a couple CPG clients tell me that their big retailers are asking less and less of them. So the share of voice, I think, is going to be a challenge and an opportunity. So that's something to prepare for. And then lastly, the activation, leveraging good data, greater focus on again, activation. I'll talk a little bit more about the predictive side as I go forward. So in terms of the value of the data, I want to spend a little time on assortment and product innovation because, again, that's where a lot of the focus is today, is everyone's sort of chasing growth. It is getting increasingly difficult to develop traditional growth through the normal assortment process. The speed at which competition is innovating is at an all-time high. We all hear about disruptors and challenger brands, and they're making it really hard to win. We used to call them ankle biters, but what's happening is the smaller brands are winning, and there's just more of them. And so again, it's I don't know if it's a death of a thousand cuts, or it's kind of like we're seeing with the channel growth over the years. There's just a lot more folks that are getting into it. It's easier to get into it. The millennials are more accepting of the challenger brand. So it's just something that we've got to look at, and again, I'll talk to that sort of towards the end. But you can't overlook the importance of having good data to really make sound assortment decisions and new item innovation decisions. So in terms of applications of shopper loyalty data, if we think beyond shopper marketing, there's really four areas that we think are really important. And I'm sure there's others, but these are the areas that we're focused heavily on. And making sure that you have a plan that is leveraging this, I would say on a more regular basis than maybe a project or an ad hoc basis is going to be really important. So source of volume is the first one. A lot of our source of volume work is done when we lose market share, and then we go, holy cow, what happened? And we're kind of in a reactive mode, and we go back and look at where that volume shifted. We're seeing more interest in the predictive side of this now, trying to get early warning signals and early warning signs of where the volume is going, and at what point does it trigger some action. So the point here of source of volume is, I think, being elevated from sort of a reactionary kind of ad hoc activity to one that's more predictive and ongoing. And that's the same with shopper migration, the second bullet there. If you think of consumers that come and households that come in and out of categories, being able to get out ahead of these curves and predicting them, and then being able to connect with them, especially on the social side. The baby companies have done a great job of it over the years because it was easy to track a newborn to an infant to a toddler, child, et cetera, and all the different stages that they go through in terms of food. Well, we're starting to do that more and more with certain categories where once you have a child, at some point they're going to get into a category, and then they're going to evolve from certain products to other products. So again, this is more the predictive and tracking side of it versus just looking at some ad hoc work. So that's a trend that we see. And then the third is really getting at optimal assortment. I'm sure you've all been involved in some work that's looked at incrementality or where the demand transfers. But I would say the time is now to take a real serious look at this. Again, you see the headwinds on some of the big brands and lost market share. Knowing really what's going to be required to succeed is going to be important, and I'll cover a little bit of that. And then the last is around the best location for disruptive innovation. As truly unique items come on, finding the best location in the store is really critical. especially if it's very disruptive, right? It probably doesn't belong in any one category, and the question is where do you really put it? And if I'm on the marketing side, I really wouldn't wait for the Catman teams to decide. I think maybe then it's too late because there's probably been some space decisions made and adjacencies made. I would really, if you do anything else, I would really get out in front of this one. Looking at attributes on other items across categories, category penetration, basket affinities, things that are really going to give you a better chance at succeeding when you come up with a truly unique item. And I think that's going to be critical. When you look at assortment decisions and trying to optimize it, hopefully you guys have access to some of this data. There's a little bit of an eye chart. Hopefully you've been able to maximize your screen. But again, this is the kind of stuff that you need to be doing on a more ongoing basis versus project by project. So these are some of the data points that are just we think pretty critical. Walk switch rates is the first one, and again, hopefully you have access to that. That tells you what percent of consumers will probably not buy that item if it's not available, if it's an out of stock, for example. So it's a measure of exclusivity and loyalty, and we can get pretty darn good now at knowing, what point will somebody walk. If they do walk, if you look at 3 columns over, what percent of that volume will go to your other items. So if you're a manufacturer, in this particular case, this first item is a San Pellegrino item. 63% of the time, the customers who buy that item will only buy that item. Will probably walk if it's not available. But if they do switch over, almost half the time they're switching to another one of their own items. So again, as you're thinking about assortment, this is the kind of information that really helps you optimize internally what you want to do. And then you've got incrementality, some share information, some household penetration, and again, some other things that are pretty important. So hopefully you got access to this, and the Shopper Insights teams do. And again, my point here is I think we've got to do more ongoing analysis versus just retailer by retailer projects. And part of that is because of what you see here. If you look at getting items on the shelf and having them stick, it's a real challenge. Here's a client of ours who told me a while back, we introduced 200 new items last year, and we ended up getting 2 net new placements. So for every item they got on the shelf, they lost an item. Everything was pretty much a one-in, one-out trade-off. And so what they're focused on right now is high velocity SKUs and highly incremental SKUs. And if it doesn't meet one of those 2 criteria, then they're really rationalizing their assortment. And I think that's going to play out more and more, I think, as we start to trying to figure out where we're going to get growth going forward. Okay, so what are we learning when it comes to some of the shopper behaviors? Having good data and having it readily accessible is really important if we're going to be making quicker decisions. We have something called an intelligence portal ourselves, so we leverage a boatload of retail transaction data. So I think what's in this particular tool that we have is I think there's about 2 billion transactions now, and around 2,000 stores from coast to coast. And what we're able to do is the nodes that you see there on the screen is just looking at where the trade-offs are occurring. So where's the switching, and then the length of the, we call these a dendrogram, but the length tells us the degree to which they're switching. And once you've got the data cleaned up and the attributes, it's really easy to start looking at behaviors across store types, across chains, across regions, which are really important. So here's some examples, and I'm calling these out because I said early on, a lot of times we're using really old trees to understand how consumers are shopping, and things are moving very quickly and they're changing. Here's an example of the most important attributes within the fluid milk category from 2015 to 2017. And the points I want to call out here is to the right, you see lactose-free, and then the Fairlife brand, which is an ultra-high filtration item. I call it Fairlife because a lot of people don't know the UHF. But those two those two are different attributes now. Ultra high filtration and then lactose. We've always had lactose free, but it's become such a bigger business to the point that consumers are choosing that attribute before they're even, for example, sometimes choosing if it's a conventional item or an organic item. So where in the past it sort of fell under conventional on the far left there, the milk type under conventional, the first column, now it's actually called out, and it was within 2 years that changed. So one of the first decisions consumers are making is sort of the type of milk, and before it was sort of conventional versus organic, and again that's different, and that has implications for innovation, has implications for promotions, it has implications for obviously product innovation. Here's a slide that talks about, or that shows the difference in channels. So same category. Some of the columns are not populated. That's just for focus reasons today. We've got data for all of those. But these are mainstream, premium, and value brands, not stores. These are brands. And the point here is the brand attribute for instant coffee today in the e-commerce channel, or these are the brick and click guys, is more important than it is in a store. So I think that has a lot to do with how they're shopping online. A lot of the systems today are still fairly clunky, and a lot of people are using brand names in the search engine to make it easier. So I think that might start to look a little bit different. But again, today it's more important. When you look at the online grocery sales, I just want to throw up one slide. This is an index because a lot of people ask, well, what are people buying online? I mean, they're big baskets, right? They're $150 orders. Again, this is brick and click. But if you look at what they're buying, they're buying large baskets, full baskets. Center store stands out. It indexes at 117. Frozen indexes at 137. So frozen is, I guess the way to read it is, frozen is disproportionately more important online than it is in store. Part of this is the store baskets are smaller. You got a lot of grab and go and in and out baskets, where online it's pretty much all full baskets, again, at least for the brick and click. But frozen, GM, dairy, grocery, packaged deli, they all index extremely high online, and so they're more important to the online shoppers than they are to the average shoppers. Down towards the bottom, you see some of the service departments, the perimeters lower. I've had questions about this. Can fresh succeed online? The answer is yes. We've got to get at better content, better messaging, greater interaction with customers online, and we'll get there. And I expect these numbers to grow as we do better with our front end systems. So that's kind of online. And again, the shopping online is different, and it impacts both assortment and what we're going to do around innovation. Store type has an impact, so premium stores versus mainstream stores. You'll see here product size and brand flip. So again, you might depending on the retailer you're working with, at least from an assortment strategy, you might want to look at that. And then location is also different. Again, here's the instant coffee example. In the mainstream, premium, and value blue boxes, there are brands. So essentially what it's saying here is premium brands in the Southeast, the brand itself is more important than across the entire U.S. Again, it may be the way people are trading off, and it could be the variety, but it's something to look at because, again, location is definitely having an impact. And then store type, or cluster, as we call it, premium stores versus value stores. You could have a different set of attributes that are more important. So the point here is that in the CDT slides is that you really do need a strategy to know how to win differently across all these different stores and across the different shelf environments. There's different types of consumer decision trees. You can go from a simple tree to something more complex, but more and more we see a lot of interest on the far right. We call it freestyle, but it's going really breaking down the physical space and going across the store. So instead of living within traditional predefined categories, how can we start to look at attributes across the store? So if we're looking at protein or gluten-free or better-for-you products, or adult snacking products versus kids snacking, how do we do that? And you've got to have good attributes. There's companies out there like Item Master and Label Insights. Those two are both in Chicago. They've got great attribute data. I know they probably work with a lot of you folks, but one of the importance of this is as you think about disruptive innovation and where we're going with some of the new product launches, knowing where to go in a store is going to be critically important. And the last slide I had is really around kind of my concluding thoughts. I know there's a lot there, and we went through it pretty quick. But if, as you guys know, and we've been talking about putting the consumer first for a long time, probably going back even to the early 90s. But more and more, it truly is. Having a consumer first mindset is critically important. Social listening, behavioral tracking, I would say, again, both are going from sort of ad hoc reactionary learning to more ongoing predictive learning. And so hopefully you're making that kind of migration. Companies that are data-driven, and we've been talking about data for a while here, it's being elevated in discussions. But the companies that are truly data-driven do have an edge. And again, moving more from a reactionary to more of a proactive or predictive mode is important. And then the third point is you really need to start thinking beyond physical space. We live, especially in the category management world, with 8-foot, 12-foot, 16-foot sets. But more and more as things go online, it's going to be different. And how we communicate with shoppers, how we connect with them, is going to be really important. And then obviously embracing the omni-channel. We're not quite there yet in food. Some of the department store chains are doing better, but this whole notion about experience, again, I can't emphasize enough. I think that is going to be a big differentiator, to the point where, again, with the right experience, you're willing to accept maybe a different brand set or a different pricing set than what you normally would. The other points I don't have on here but are important is speed's going to win. Hopefully you've got a culture and you're developing a culture around speed. And be prepared to win at a smaller scale. Creating small dedicated teams, startup teams to focus on your own challenger brands, celebrate these small successes. For example, the beer guys have a floor that's just dedicated to craft beer, and unless you're on the craft beer team, you can't get access to the floor. It's a whole different mindset, and I think we need to have that across more CPG companies. And then, everything is moving global. Continue to think global, but more and more we've got to act at a local level. So think global, but act local. So, John, that's it for my presentation. I know we ran a little bit over. I don't know if there's time for questions.
Well, we have time for one, Paul, and that question is, how do you think AI and the shopper behaviors you have mentioned for the future would affect supply chains?
Well, yeah, I think supply chains are going to get more challenged. I think of some of the work that we're doing right now around smaller case packs, smaller packages, being able to penetrate. We are seeing more formats that are smaller. So if you think about Amazon Go or the Dollar Guys or the Drug Guys, limited assortment stores, Aldi continues to grow really well. Those environments are very different, and it's going to require different inventory levels, multiple inventory levels. I think we're going to see more ship to, ship from points, like with e-commerce. Little depots closer to the stores, because we're going to need to do that to get the product there. So yeah, I think actually supply chain is going to get more complex as we deal with again different products, packaging, and and where e-commerce is going. So I don't know if I answered that question directly, but I think that is going to be a critical point to it, which is supply chain is going to be more challenged.
Okay. Thank you very much, Paul. That was a really interesting presentation. Well done. Thank you. If you have further questions, you can direct them to Paul. His contact information, his phone number and email address are on the screen. So you can get to Paul at any time, I'm sure, and he'll be very happy to chat with you. Okay.